The day I was born, my parents didn't celebrate, they sighed, because I was a girl. My grandmother told me this story when I was old enough to understand the weight of those words. She said my father had paced the hospital corridor for hours, chain-smoking Camels, convinced that this time, the third time, God would finally give him another son. When the nurse emerged with her tired smile and said, "Congratulations, Mr. Chen, you have a healthy baby girl," his face fell like a man who'd just lost everything at the poker table. My mother, still weak from 18 hours of labor, turned her face to the wall and wept, not tears of joy or relief, but tears of disappointment and shame. In our community, in that small farming town in California's Central Valley in 1962, a daughter was a burden, a mouth to feed until some other family took her off your hands, an investment with no return. They named me Wei, which means small or tiny. Not beautiful or precious or strong, just small. My earliest memories are painted in shades of less than, less food on my plate than my brothers received, less attention, less love. I remember being 4 years old, sitting at our scratched wooden dinner table, watching my father heap mountains of rice and the best cuts of pork onto my brother's plates. First David, who was 8, then Tommy, who was 6. By the time the serving spoon reached me, only scraps remained. "Girls don't need as much," my mother would say, her voice flat and matter-of-fact as if she were commenting on the weather. "You're not doing hard work like your brothers." But I was doing hard work. While David and Tommy played in the yard after school, throwing a baseball back and forth under our father's proud gaze, I was inside scrubbing dishes with hands so small I could barely grip the sponge. I was sweeping floors, folding laundry, peeling potatoes until my fingers cramped. I was 7 years old and already intimately familiar with the smell of lye soap and the way hot water could turn your hands raw and red. On David's 9th birthday, our parents threw a party. Neighbors came over, and my mother spent days preparing a feast char, siu bo, dumplings, a whole steamed fish, and a beautiful cake from the Chinese bakery in Fresno. David received a new bicycle, shining red with white streamers on the handlebars. He rode it up and down our street for hours while the adults clapped and cheered. When my 7th birthday came 2 months later, there was no party, no cake. My mother made the regular dinner, rice, vegetables, a small amount of chicken, and as we ate, nobody mentioned that it was my birthday at all. I sat there, fork in hand, waiting for someone to remember, waiting for my father to look up from his newspaper, waiting for my mother to bring out even a single cupcake with a candle. The waiting was worse than the forgetting. That night, I cried into my pillow, muffling the sound so my brothers wouldn't hear through the thin wall that separated my tiny room from theirs. Their room had 2 beds, a bookshelf, a toy chest overflowing with treasures. My room had a cot, a cardboard box for my 3 dresses, and a window that wouldn't quite close, letting in the cold valley air every winter night. School should have been my escape, but even there, the message was clear. I wasn't worth the investment. David and Tommy received new notebooks every year, fresh pencils, protractors, and calculators as they got older. They joined the baseball team, the math club, the science fair. Our father attended every game, every competition, beaming with pride. I received hand-me-down supplies and stern reminders not to waste them. When I brought home straight A's on my report card in 3rd grade, my mother glanced at it and said, "Good, now go help with dinner." When I asked to join the art club, which cost $5 for supplies, my father looked at me as if I'd asked for the moon. "That's a waste of money," he said. "You'll just get married someday. Your husband's family will benefit from any education you get, not us." I was 8 years old. The years between 8 and 15 were when I began to truly understand my place in my family's hierarchy. I wasn't just less important than my brothers, I was actively resented for existing at all. When I was 11, my father's restaurant supply business began to struggle. The big chains were moving into the valley, undercutting his prices, and money grew tighter. I heard my parents arguing late at night, their voices carrying through the walls. "We should have stopped after David," my father said. "2 sons would have been enough." "I wanted to give you more sons," my mother replied, her voice defensive and bitter. How was I supposed to know? She never finished that sentence, but she didn't need to. I knew what she meant. How was she supposed to know she'd be cursed with a daughter? That year, David started high school and needed money for football equipment. Tommy needed a new clarinet for band, and suddenly every penny was scrutinized. Every light I left on, Every scrap of food I took, every minute of hot water I used for my weekly shower, all of it was monitored and criticized. Wei, you're wasting electricity again. Wei, you took too much rice. Wei, your shoes are fine. You don't need new ones just because there's a hole. I learned to make myself invisible, to take up as little space as possible. I wore my shoes until my toes poked through the canvas, stuffing newspaper inside to cover the holes. I ate less and less, my body staying perpetually thin and small, living up to my name. I turned off lights so religiously that I did my homework by the dim glow of a single lamp, squinting at the pages until my eyes ached, but it was never enough. When I was 13, something shifted. My mother sat me down at the kitchen table one Saturday morning while my brothers were at baseball practice. She had a cup of tea in front of her, and she wouldn't meet my eyes. Wei, she said, you're old enough now to understand our situation. Your father and I have been talking, and we think it would be best if you went to live with second aunt in Los Angeles. My heart stopped. Second aunt was my father's older sister, a woman I'd met exactly twice in my life. She ran a garment factory in LA's fashion district, and from what I understood, she was even stricter and colder than my own parents. For how long? I whispered. For as long as necessary. My mother's voice was firm. Decided, you can work in her factory, help with her household. She's agreed to take you. You'll have a place to sleep and food to eat. It's a good opportunity. But what about school? My mother waved her hand dismissively. You've had enough school. You can read and write and do basic math. That's more than I had at your age. What more do you need? What more did I need? I needed a mother who loved me. I needed a father who saw me as more than a financial burden. I needed to finish middle school, to go to high school, to have dreams bigger than a sewing machine in a windowless factory. But I was 13 years old, and I had no power, no voice, no choice. You'll leave next month, my mother said, standing up. Second aunt will pick you up. Pack your things. I sat at that table long after she left, staring at the tea leaves swirling in her abandoned cup, trying to read my future in them the way the old women in Chinatown claimed they could. But I saw nothing except darkness and uncertainty. The day second aunt came to collect me, my brothers were at school, and my father was at work. It was just my mother and me in the house. And the silence was suffocating. I had packed everything I owned into a single cardboard suitcase: 3 dresses, 2 pairs of underwear, 1 pair of pants, my toothbrush, and the only thing I'd ever received as a gift, a small jade pendant my grandmother had given me before she died, when I was 6. It was a circle of pale green stone, smooth and cool against my palm, and she'd told me it would protect me. "This is for you," she'd whispered, pressing it into my hand. "Don't show your parents. They'll take it. But you keep this way. You remember that someone loved you." It was the only evidence I had that anyone in the world had ever wanted me. Second aunt arrived in a brown Buick that had seen better days. She was a tall woman with severe features and hair pulled back so tightly it made her eyes look stretched. She didn't get out of the car, just honked twice. I looked at my mother, some desperate, childish part of me hoping she might have changed her mind, hoping she might hug me, tell me she loved me, tell me this was a mistake. Instead, she picked up my suitcase and walked to the door. "Be respectful," she said. "Work hard. Don't embarrass the family." Those were the last words my mother said to me before I left. Not, "I love you," not, "I'll miss you." Just a reminder that even in exile, I was still capable of bringing them shame. The drive to Los Angeles took 4 hours, and second aunt spoke maybe 15 words the entire time. She told me the factory rules. I would work 6 days a week, 8 hours a day. I would live in a room above the factory with 3 other girls. I would give her my wages, and she would provide my meals and a place to sleep. I would not complain. I would not cause trouble. "Your parents are doing you a favor," she said as we merged onto the highway. "Girls like you, with no prospects, no dowry, you're lucky to have work." I stared out the window at the dry valley landscape giving way to the urban sprawl of LA, and I felt something inside me go very quiet and very hard. Not broken, I was too young to break completely, but compressed, like coal under pressure, changing into something else, something that might survive. The factory was a 3-story building in a neighborhood where all the signs were in Chinese and Spanish. The air smelled like exhaust and garlic and something sweet I couldn't identify. Second aunt parked in the alley behind the building and led me up a narrow, metal staircase to the 3rd floor. The room she showed me to was barely bigger than a closet, for cots were crammed inside, with wooden crates between them serving as knit. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling. The window was covered with bars and looked out onto a brick wall 3 feet away. "That one's yours," second aunt said, pointing to the cot in the corner, the one that looked like it might collapse if you breathed on it wrong. "The other girls work the evening shift. You'll work mornings. Bathrooms down the hall. You share it with 8 other people, so don't take long. Dinner is at 6. Don't be late." She left, her footsteps echoing down the metal stairs. I sat on the cot, and it groaned under my weight. I was 13 years old and weighed maybe 90 pounds, and the bed still groaned. For the first time since my mother had told me I was leaving, I let myself cry. Not quietly, not into a pillow, but huge, gasping sobs that shook my whole body. I cried for the childhood I'd never had, for the parents who'd never wanted me, for the future that seemed to be nothing but sewing machines and windowless rooms and the smell of someone else's garlic. I cried until I had nothing left, until I was hollow and empty and dry. And then I stopped. I unpacked my cardboard suitcase, hanging my 3 dresses on the nails that served as a closet. I placed my grandmother's jade pendant under my thin pillow. I laid down on the groaning cot and stared at the water-stained ceiling. And I made myself a promise. I would survive this. I would survive my aunt, the factory, the loneliness, all of it. I would survive because spite was a powerful thing, and I had plenty of it. I would survive to prove to my parents that casting me away was the worst mistake they'd ever made. I would survive because I was small, yes, but I was also strong. I just didn't know it yet. The work at second aunt's factory was brutal. I started at 6 in the morning, when the building was still dim and cold, and worked until 2 in the afternoon. My job was simple but relentless. I sat at a sewing machine, and I sewed straight seams on women's blouses, the same seam, thousands of times a day, until my hands cramped and my back ached and the whir of the machine invaded my dreams. The other workers were mostly women, Mexican, Salvadoran, ranging in age from teenagers to grandmothers. They barely spoke to me at first. I was the boss's niece, which made me suspect they thought I had it easier, that I was some kind of spy reporting back to second aunt. It took 3 months before anyone talked to me beyond pass the scissors or move over. Her name was Rosa, and she worked the machine next to mine. She was maybe 25, with tired eyes and hands that never stopped moving. One day, I got my finger caught in the machine, not badly, but enough to bleed. I bit my lip to keep from crying out, not wanting to stop the line, but Rosa saw. "Stop the machine," she said sharply. A horror now. She pulled me away from the machine, examined my finger with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd seen this before. The cut wasn't deep, but it was bleeding steadily. "Second aunt doesn't keep a first aid kit up here." "Of course," Rosa muttered. She pulled a bandana from her pocket, clean and bright blue, and wrapped it around my finger tightly. "Keep pressure on it. I'll tell the supervisor you need 5 minutes. I can keep working," I said quickly. Getting injured, even slightly, felt like proving my parents right, that I was weak, that I was a burden. Rosa looked at me with something between pity and understanding. "You're 13, right? Same age as my daughter." She shook her head. "Keep pressure on it. 5 minutes won't kill the quota." After that, Rosa adopted me in the way that kind people sometimes adopt strays. She shared her lunch with me tamales, her mother made, so delicious I nearly cried the first time I tasted them. She taught me Spanish curse words that made me laugh, and she told me stories about her daughter Maria, who was in 8th grade and wanted to be a nurse. "You should be in school too," Rosa said one day as we ate lunch on the fire escape, perched on the metal grating 3 stories above the alley. "My aunt says I've had enough school." "Your aunt is wrong." Rosa's voice was firm. "I never finished school, and I regret it every day. You're smart. I see you reading newspapers people leave behind, doing the math in your head when the supervisors calculate our pay. Don't waste that." "I don't have a choice." "There's always a choice," Rosa said. "Sometimes the choices are all bad, but there's still a choice." Her words stayed with me, burrowing into my chest like seeds waiting for the right conditions to grow. I worked at the factory for 2 years. 2 years of seams and lint and machines so loud I couldn't hear my own thoughts. 2 years of living in that tiny room with girls who came and went, most of them lasting only a few months before moving on to something else or disappearing back to wherever they'd come from. Second, Aunt paid me nothing. She took my wages for room and board, though the room was barely habitable, and the board was rice and vegetables, and, if we were lucky, a small piece of chicken once a week. I had no money, no possessions beyond what fit in my cardboard suitcase, no freedom, but I had time to think. I thought about Rosa's daughter, in school, dreaming of being a nurse. I thought about my brothers, who would be in high school now, probably thinking about college. I thought about my parents, who had signed me away like I was a piece of furniture they no longer needed, and I thought about the future, my future, which didn't have to look like this forever. Just before I turned 15, Rosa came to work with a black eye. She tried to hide it under makeup, but I saw. Everyone saw, but nobody said anything because we all understood that some things were private, that some pain was too dangerous to acknowledge. During lunch, I sat next to her on the fire escape, and we didn't talk. We just sat there, eating our food, watching the city move below us. Finally, Rosa spoke. "I'm leaving Marco," she said quietly. "I'm taking Maria, and we're moving in with my mother in Boyle Heights. It's going to be hard, but staying is harder." "What about money?" I asked. "I'll figure it out. I always do." She looked at me. "You should leave too. Get out while you're still young. This place will swallow you if you let it." "Where would I go?" "Anywhere. Nowhere. It doesn't matter. Just somewhere that's yours." She crushed her empty tamale wrapper in her fist. "Promise me you'll think about it." I promised. 2 weeks later, Rosa was gone. No goodbye, no warning, just an empty machine next to mine, and a new woman who didn't speak English or Chinese, and who didn't meet anyone's eyes. But Rosa had left something behind tucked under my pillow. I found an envelope with $75 in it, and a note, "For when you're ready to leave. You deserve more than this." I held that money like it was made of gold. $75. I'd never had that much money in my entire life. It was hope, tangible and real, folded into small bills. I hid it inside my grandmother's jade pendant, wrapping it carefully and tucking the bundle into my pillowcase. And I started planning. I left Second Dance Factory 3 months after my 15th birthday, in the middle of the night. I had been careful, so careful, in my planning. I'd started stealing small things, nothing Second Aunt would notice immediately. An extra apple from the kitchen, a pair of socks from the lost and found box, a worn jacket someone had left behind. I'd squirreled these things away, hiding them in different places around the room, so that if someone discovered one cache, they wouldn't find everything. I'd also started keeping a notebook, stolen from Second Aunt's office, where I wrote down everything I learned about the world beyond the factory. I copied down addresses from newspapers, women's shelters, employment offices, churches that offered help. I wrote down bus routes and costs. I calculated and recalculated how far Rosa's $75 would take me. Not far, but maybe far enough. The night I left, the city was quiet in the way it never is during the day. It was a Tuesday in October. Cool enough that I needed the stolen jacket, but not so cold that I'd freeze. I'd chosen Tuesday because Second Aunt always went to Mahjong on Tuesday nights and didn't come home until after midnight. I packed my cardboard suitcase one last time, taking only what I could carry. My 3 dresses, now worn thin from use, my grandmother's jade pendant with Rosa's money hidden inside, the notebook with all my plans, and a photo I'd stolen from Second Aunt's office, a picture of my parents and brothers, taken at David's high school graduation the year before. I didn't take it because I missed them. I took it because I needed to remember what I was running from. I walked down the metal stairs for the last time, my footsteps echoing too loud in the quiet. I was terrified someone would hear, would stop me, would drag me back, but the building stayed silent. Asterisk. The streets of downtown LA at night were nothing like the valley town I'd grown up in. They were alive in a different way, darker, more dangerous, but also full of possibility. I walked quickly, head down, suitcase clutched tight, following the route I'd memorized from my stolen maps. The bus station was 8 blocks away, 8 blocks that felt like 8 miles, every shadow hiding some potential threat. A man called out to me in Spanish, asking where I was going. I didn't answer, just walked faster. A woman sitting in the doorway asked if I had any change. I shook my head, even though Rosa's $75 was burning a hole in my pocket. The bus station was bright and fluorescent, full of people sleeping in plastic chairs and crying babies, and the smell of old coffee and desperation. I approached the ticket counter with my heart in my throat. "How far north can I get for $20? I asked the woman behind the glass. She looked at me, and I saw her taking in my age, my cheap clothes, my too small suitcase. I saw her deciding whether to ask questions. "Bakersfield," she said finally. $20 will get you to Bakersfield. Bus leaves in 40 minutes. Bakersfield was only 90 miles from my parents' house. It wasn't far enough, but it was all I could afford and still have money left over to survive. "One ticket, please," I said. She printed the ticket and slid it under the glass. "You got someone meeting you there, honey?" "Yes," I lied. She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes, but she nodded anyway. "Gate 7, good luck." I clutched that ticket like a lifeline and found a seat as far from the counter as possible, tucking myself into a corner where I could watch both the entrance and the gate. I was terrified Second Aunt would somehow know, would somehow find me, would drag me back to the factory and lock me up where I could never leave. But 40 minutes passed, and nobody came. When they called for boarding, I stood on shaking legs and joined the line. Most of the passengers were from Wickers. Tired men and women who smelled like soil and sweat and looked like they'd been awake for days. I found a seat in the back, next to a window, and pressed my face against the glass as the bus pulled out of the station. Los Angeles disappeared behind us, and with it, the only life I'd known for 2 years. I should have felt relieved, triumphant even. Instead, I just felt alone. Bakersfield was hot and dusty and smelled like oil fields and cow manure. I stepped off the bus at 6 in the morning with my cardboard suitcase and $55 left to my name, and I had absolutely no idea what to do next. The bus station had a bathroom, so I went inside and tried to make myself look presentable. I washed my face in the sink, combed my hair with my fingers, changed into my least worn dress. I looked at myself in the mirror, 15 years old, barely 5 feet tall, thin as a rail, with dark circles under my eyes and hair that wouldn't cooperate. I looked like a runaway. I looked like someone's problem. I needed to look like someone worth hiring. I spent $1 from my precious remaining funds on a coffee and a stale donut at the station cafe, forcing myself to eat slowly, even though I was starving. As I ate, I studied the bulletin board near the bathrooms, looking for job postings. There weren't many, farm work, mostly, which paid by the basket and required transportation I didn't have. A few ads for house cleaning, all requiring references I couldn't provide. One ad for a waitress at a diner called Maggie's, downtown. I copied down the address and asked the woman behind the cafe counter for directions. "You looking for work?" she asked, eyeing me with the same assessing look the bus ticket woman had given me. "Yes, ma'am." "How old are you?" I'd learned to lie about this. 18. She didn't believe me any more than the bus ticket woman had, but she shrugged. "Maggie's always needs help. Tell her Doreen sent you. She probably still won't hire you, but it can't hurt." "Thank you," she nodded. "One piece of advice, kid, whatever you're running from, make sure you're running toward something too. Otherwise, you'll just end up in a different kind of trap." I thought about that as I walked the 1.5 miles to Maggie's diner, my suitcase getting heavier with each step. What was I running toward? I hadn't thought that far ahead. I'd been so focused on getting away from Second Aunt, from the factory, from the life my parents had condemned me to, that I hadn't considered what came next. I just knew it had to be better than what I'd left behind. Maggie's diner was a low, flat building with a gravel parking lot and a neon sign that was missing the G inside. It was all cracked vinyl booths and a long formica counter with red stools. The smell of bacon and coffee was so overwhelming, so wonderful after 2 years of factory cafeteria food, that I nearly cried. A woman with bottle red hair and a face lined with 50 years of hard living looked up from behind the counter. "We're not open yet," she said. "I'm looking for Maggie. Doreen from the bus station sent me. I'm looking for work." The woman Maggie presumably set down the coffee pot she'd been refilling and crossed her arms. "You got experience?" "Yes, Mom. 2 years. Where?" I'd prepared for this question. "A restaurant in LA, family place. They closed down." A lie, but not one she could easily verify. "How old are you really?" 15, I admitted, "but I'm a hard worker. I'll do any shift, any job. I don't complain." and I don't steal. Maggie studied me for a long moment. You got a place to stay? Not yet. Family in town? No. Mom, she sighed, and I recognized that sigh. It was the same sigh my mother had given when I was born, the sound of someone confronting an inconvenient truth. But then Maggie surprised me. I got a storage room in back with a cot, she said. Used to be where I'd sleep during the overnight shift, back when we were open 24 hours. You can stay there, temporary, until you save up enough for a real place. It's not much, barely bigger than a closet, but it's warm and dry, and it's got a door that locks. In exchange, you work the opening shift, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., 6 days a week, minimum wage, plus tips, plus 1 meal per shift. Deal. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A job, a place to stay, food, all in one conversation. Deal, I said, before she could change her mind. Don't make me regret this, Maggie warned. You steal from me. You're gone. You don't show up. You're gone. You cause problems with customers. You're gone. Understood? Yes, Mom. Thank you, ma'am. I won't let you down. Maggie's expression softened slightly. Yeah, well, we'll see. Doreen's got a good eye for people. If she sent you, you're probably all right. Come on, I'll show you the room, and then we'll get you trained. ***, the room was indeed barely bigger than a closet. It had a cot, a milk crate nightstand, and a single light bulb with a pull chain. There was no window, no closet, not even a mirror. But it was mine, the first space that had ever been truly mine. I set down my cardboard suitcase and touched the jade pendant hanging around my neck. Thank you, grandmother, I whispered, and then I got to work. I worked at Maggie's diner for 3 years, and those 3 years taught me more about the world, about people, and about myself than any school could have. Maggie was tough but fair. She paid me exactly what she'd promised, never a penny more or less. But she also fed me well and never once asked me questions I didn't want to answer. She taught me how to balance plates up my arm, how to smile at rude customers until they felt ashamed of themselves, how to calculate tips in my head, and how to save money even when it felt impossible. Every penny you don't absolutely need to spend, you save, she told me during a slow Tuesday afternoon. Open a bank account. Don't keep cash where someone can steal it. And never, ever, trust a man who says he'll take care of your money for you. I opened my first bank account when I was 16. I had to lie about my age again, but by then I'd gotten good at it. I deposited Rosa's remaining money, $35, and added to it every week, $5 here, $10 there. The numbers grew slowly, but they grew. The customers at Maggie's were mostly working people, tukas, farm workers, families driving through on their way somewhere else. But there were regulars too, people I came to know by name and order. There was Tom, who worked at the oil fields and always ordered the same thing, 2 eggs over easy, hash browns, wheat toast, and black coffee. There was Mrs. Chun, no relation to my family, but the shared last name always made my heart skip, who came in every Sunday after church for a piece of pie and hot tea. And there was Alice. Alice was a nurse at the county hospital. She'd come in during her breaks, usually around midnight when I was closing up, always exhausted, always kind. She'd order coffee and whatever pie we had left, and she'd sit at the counter and tell me stories about her shift, the baby she'd helped deliver, the drunk driver they'd pieced back together, the grandmother who died holding her granddaughter's hand. "You're a good listener," Alice said one night. "You ever think about being a nurse?" The question caught me off guard. Me? Why not you? You're smart, you're calm under pressure. I've seen you handle the dinner rush, and you care about people. I can tell. I didn't finish high school, I admit it. I only made it through 8th grade. So get your GED, take classes at the community college. It's not too late. You're what? 17? 18? 17? Exactly. Practically a baby. You've got your whole life ahead of you. Alice stirred sugar into her coffee. 3 packets like always. Look, I know it's none of my business, but you're too smart to be wiping down tables forever. Not that there's anything wrong with this work, God knows. This country would fall apart without people like Maggie, but you've got potential. Don't waste it. That word again. Potential. My parents had never thought I had potential. Second aunt had never thought I had potential. Even I had never thought I had potential. But Alice did. How would I even start? I asked. Alice said promptly. They've got GED prep books. Study on your days off. Take the test. Once you've got your high school equivalency, you can start taking classes. Financial aid exists. Scholarships exist. There are ways. You just have to be brave enough to try. That conversation changed something in me. For the first time since I'd left my parents' house, I started thinking beyond just survival. I started thinking about what kind of life I actually wanted to build. I started going to the library on my days off, spending hours in the reference section, working through GED prep books. The subjects came back to me more easily than I'd expected: math, reading, even the science and social studies I'd thought I'd forgotten. It turned out that when you actually wanted to learn, when it was for yourself and not because someone was forcing you, education felt different. It felt like freedom. I took the GED test 3 months before my 18th birthday. I'd been so nervous I'd barely slept the night before, terrified that I'd fail, that I'd prove my parents right, that I was stupid and worthless and incapable. When the results came back, I sat in Maggie's storage room and cried for the second time since I'd arrived in Bakersfield. But this time, I was crying because I'd passed. Not just passed, I'd scored in the 90th percentile. I had my high school diploma. "Proud of you, kid," Maggie said when I showed her the certificate. "Your parents must be proud too." "They don't know," I said. "I haven't talked to them since I was 13. Maggie's eyes widened. "Jesus, that's..." She stopped, seemed to reconsider what she was going to say. "Well, sometimes the family we choose is better than the family we're born with." You remember that with my GED in hand, I applied to Bakersfield Community College. I applied for every scholarship and grant I could find, wrote essays about being a first-generation college student. Technically true, even though my brothers had probably already graduated from university by then, and held my breath. The acceptance letter arrived on a Thursday. I was 19 years old. I'd saved $6,000. And I was going to college. I was going to be a nurse. Because Alice was right, I did care about people, and I wanted to help them in ways nobody had ever helped me. College was harder than I'd imagined, but in good ways. I'd expected the coursework to be difficult, and it was anatomy, chemistry, physiology, all of it requiring hours of study I carved out between work shifts at Maggie's. But the part I hadn't anticipated was how strange it felt to be around people my own age who had normal lives. They talked about their parents, helping them move into dorms, about family vacations and high school proms, and drama that seemed impossibly trivial to me. They complained about having to work part-time jobs like it was some unusual burden, not just the way life was. I didn't tell anyone my story. I kept it locked inside, a private history that set me apart from these kids, who'd never known what it meant to be truly unwanted. But I made friends anyway. There was Jennifer, a biology major with dreams of medical school, who studied with me in the library and shared her notes when I had to miss class for work. There was Marcus, a guy in my chemistry class who was the first person in his family to go to college, who understood what it meant to carry the weight of proving yourself. And there was Professor Sarah Martinez, who taught my introduction to nursing course and saw something in me that I was still learning to see in myself. "You have a gift for this," she said one day after I'd successfully completed a particularly difficult clinical simulation. "You're calm under pressure, and you have genuine empathy. Those are things you can't teach." "Thank you," I said, uncomfortable with the praise in a way I'd never quite gotten over. "Have you thought about specialization? Pediatrics, maybe, or emergency medicine?" I thought about the children I'd seen at Maggie's over the years, the ones with bruises their parents claimed came from falling, the ones who were too quiet, too well-behaved, too afraid. I thought about the girl I'd been, small and unwanted and voiceless. "Pediatrics," I said. "I want to work with children." Professor Martinez smiled. "I think you'll be excellent at it." I graduated with my associate's degree in nursing when I was 22, passed my licensing exam on the first try, and got hired at Bakersfield Memorial Hospital's pediatric unit. The pay was more money than I'd ever imagined, making enough that I could finally afford to rent a real apartment, a one-bedroom place with a kitchen and a bathroom that was all mine and windows that looked out onto a small garden. I furnished it slowly, carefully, buying each piece used but in good condition: a bed frame instead of a cot on the floor, a small dining table with 2 chairs, a bookshelf for the textbooks I couldn't bring myself to sell. Every object was a declaration. I existed. I mattered. I had made a life. On the day I moved into that apartment, I hung my grandmother's jade pendant on the wall above my bed. It was still the most precious thing I owned. The next decade of my life was the happiest I'd ever known, not because everything was easy, it wasn't, but because for the first time, I was living a life I'd chosen. I worked hard at the hospital, taking extra shifts when I could, building a reputation as the nurse who was good with difficult cases, the scared kids, the traumatized ones, the ones who'd been hurt by the very people who were supposed to protect them. I understood them in ways my colleagues couldn't. I knew what it felt like to be small and powerless and afraid. You have a way with them, my supervisor, Linda, told me during a performance review. The children trust you immediately. I didn't tell her why. I didn't tell her that I looked at these broken children and saw myself, that I spoke to them the way I wished someone had spoken to me, that I made them feel safe because I knew exactly what it felt like to be unsafe. When I was 25, I met James. He was a social worker, often called to the hospital for cases involving child welfare, and we kept ending up on the same difficult situations. He was patient and kind, with a quiet strength that reminded me of Alice, the nurse who'd changed my life. We started having coffee after shift changes, then dinner. Then he was the person I called when I had a bad day, and I was the person he called when he needed to talk about a case that had gotten under his skin. "You're different from anyone I've ever met," he told me one night over Thai food at our favorite restaurant. "You've got this strength that's not loud or aggressive. It's like steel wrapped in silk." "I had to be strong," I said. "I didn't have a choice." "You always have a choice," he said gently. "Some people break when things get hard. You didn't. That's not nothing." We got married when I was 27, at City Hall, with Maggie and Alice as our witnesses. I wore a simple white dress from the department store and carried a bouquet of roses James had picked up from the grocery store. It was perfect. James wanted to know about my family, wanted to invite them to the wedding, but I told him the truth. They'd sent me away when I was 13, and I hadn't spoken to them since. "Don't you want to reconnect?" he asked. "Don't you want them to see what you've become?" "No," I said firmly. "They made their choice. I've made mine." He respected that, even though I could tell he didn't fully understand it. James's family was warm and welcoming, the kind of family that had weekly dinners and remembered birthdays and showed up for each other. They folded me into their lives without hesitation, giving me the family dinners and holiday celebrations I'd never had growing up. When I was 29, I gave birth to twin daughters, Sarah and Emily, named after Professor Martinez, and no one in particular. I just liked the name Emily. I held them in the hospital room, one in each arm, and I made them a promise that I'd kept every single day since. "You will always be wanted," I whispered. "You will always be loved. You will always matter." I raised my daughters the way I wished I'd been raised, with patience, with encouragement, with the firm belief that they could be anything they wanted to be. I read to them every night, helped them with their homework, attended every school play and soccer game and science fair. I told them they were brilliant and beautiful and capable. I gave them the childhood I'd never had. I was 39 years old when my past came knocking on my door. It was a Tuesday evening in March. James was at a conference in Sacramento, and the twins were at their high school's spring musical rehearsal. I was home alone, making dinner and enjoying the rare quiet when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find my brother Tommy standing on my porch. I didn't recognize him at first. The boy I remembered was 14, gangly and carefree, throwing a baseball in our parents' yard while I scrubbed dishes inside. This man was 51, overweight, with thinning hair and a face lined with stress and something that looked like shame. "Way," he said uncertainly. My hand tightened on the doorknob. "Tommy, you remember me?" He seemed surprised. "Of course I remember you. You're my brother." The words came out flat, emotionless. "Can I come in? I need to talk to you." Every instinct screamed at me to close the door, to send him away, to protect the life I'd built from the family that had destroyed my childhood. But curiosity won. I stepped aside and let him in. He looked around my house, the comfortable furniture, the family photos on the walls, the evidence of a life well lived, and I saw something flicker across his face. Surprise, regret. "You've done well for yourself," he said. "What do you want, Tommy?" He sat down on my couch without being invited, and suddenly he looked very old and very tired. "It's Mom and Dad. Things are bad. Really bad." I waited, saying nothing. "David and I, we made some bad investments. Real estate, right before the crash. We lost everything. The business, our houses, everything. And we borrowed from Mom and Dad to try to fix it. And we lost that too." He rubbed his face with both hands. "They're broke. The house is in foreclosure. Dad had a stroke last year, and Mom can't take care of him alone. They need help. And David, I asked. David's in Arizona. He's not doing well. Drinking. He can't help. So you came to me. I heard the ice in my own voice. The daughter they threw away when I was 13. The daughter they haven't spoken to in 26 years. You came to me. Tommy had the grace to look ashamed. I know how this looks. But you're the only one left. You're the only one who can help them. Where were they when I needed help? The words burst out of me, sharp and bitter. Where were they when I was working in a factory at 13? When I was living in a storage closet and eating one meal a day? Where were they for any of it? I know, Tommy said quietly. We were wrong. All of us. We were wrong about you. Wrong about everything. Mom knows it. Dad knows it. They're too proud to say it, but they know. Too proud. I laughed. A harsh sound. They're too proud to apologize, but not too proud to ask for money. It's not about money. Yes, they need financial help. But more than that, they need someone to take care of them. Dad can barely walk. Mom is exhausted. They're scared and alone, and they're finally realizing what they threw away when they sent you to LA. I stood up, went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water with shaking hands. Tommy followed me. Please, he said. I know we don't deserve your help. I know we failed you in every possible way, but they're still your parents, and they're dying. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but soon. Don't let them die alone and afraid. They left me alone and afraid when I was a child, I said. Why should I care what happens to them now? Because you're better than we are, Tommy said simply. You always were. That's why you're here, in this house, with this life, and we're all broken and desperate. You were the strong one, You were always the strong one. After Tommy left, I sat at my kitchen table for hours, staring at nothing. When James came home the next day, he found me still sitting there, surrounded by old photos I'd dug out from the back of my closet, the picture I'd stolen from Second Aunt's office, my parents and brothers at David's graduation, all of them smiling like they didn't have a care in the world. A few other photos I'd collected over the years from relatives who didn't know better than to send me holiday cards, my parents aging in snapshots, their faces getting older, harder, more worn. What's wrong? James asked immediately. I told him everything, about Tommy's visit, about my parents' situation, about the choice I was facing. What do you want to do? He asked when I finished. I want to tell them to go to hell, I said honestly. I want to let them suffer the way they let me suffer. I want them to feel what it's like to be abandoned by the people who are supposed to love you. Okay, James said. That's valid. You have every right to feel that way. But, I prompted, because I could hear the unspoken word hanging between us. But that's not who you are, he said gently. You're angry, and you should be, but you're not cruel. You're not petty. You're the woman who became a pediatric nurse because you wanted to protect children the way no one protected you. You're the mother who spent the last 15 years making sure our daughters never feel unloved or unwanted. That's who you are, And I don't think you can live with yourself if you turn your back on them completely, no matter how much they might deserve it. I started crying then, huge, gasping sobs that shook my whole body. James held me while I cried for the little girl I'd been, for the parents I'd needed but never had, for the impossible situation I was in now. I hate that you're right, I said when I could finally speak. I know, he said. I'm sorry. That night, I talked to the twins. They were 15. The same age I'd been when I'd escaped Second Aunt's factory, old enough to understand difficult truths. I told them about my childhood, things I'd never fully explained before, about being unwanted, about the factory, about building my life from nothing, and about the choice I was facing now. Sarah, who looked so much like me, it was sometimes startling, spoke first. Are you going to help them? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to let them suffer. What would you want us to do? Emily asked. If we were in your position, what would you tell us to do? It was such a simple question, but it cut straight to the heart of everything. What would I want my daughters to do? Would I want them to become hard and bitter, to match cruelty with cruelty? Or would I want them to be better than the people who'd hurt them? I'd tell you to be kind, I said quietly, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Then you know what you have to do, Sarah said. She was right. I did know. But knowing and doing were two very different things. I went to see my parents on a Saturday in April. I drove the 90 miles back to the valley town I'd grown up in, the town I'd left 26 years ago and never looked back at. The landscape was exactly as I remembered: flat fields, distant mountains, skies so wide and blue it hurt to look at. The house I grew up in was smaller than I remembered, and it looked tired. The paint was peeling, the yard was overgrown, the gate hung crooked on its hinges. It looked like a place where hope had died slowly. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, gathering my courage, before I finally walked to the front door and knocked. My mother answered. She was 76 years old now, her hair completely white, her face a map of wrinkles. She'd always been thin, but now she looked fragile, like she might blow away in a strong wind. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the recognition dawn in her eyes. "Wait," she whispered. "Hello, Mother." She started crying immediately, right there in the doorway, her face crumpling. "You came. Tommy said he found you, but I didn't think you'd come. Can I come in?" She nodded, stepping aside, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. The inside of the house was as worn as the outside. The furniture was the same as I remembered, the same scratched wooden table where I'd eaten my small portions, the same couch where my brothers had sat watching TV while I did chores, but everything looked shabby now, used up, like the life had been drained out of it. "Your father is in the bedroom," my mother said. "He sleeps most of the day now. The stroke." "I know, Tommy told me." We stood there in the living room, two strangers who shared blood and nothing else. And I realized I had no idea what to say to her. My mother spoke first. "You look good, healthy, happy." She said it like she was surprised. "I am happy," I said. "I have a good life, a husband who loves me, twin daughters, a career I'm proud of." "Tommy told me." He said, "You're a nurse, pediatric nurse." "I work with children." Something flickered across her face. I'd regret, but it was gone before I could name it. "Your father should see you," she said finally. "Before we talk, he should see what you've become." She led me down the hallway to my parents' bedroom. My father was propped up in bed, staring at a muted television. He'd always been a big man, barrel-chested and strong from years of physical labor. Now he looked shrunken, one side of his face drooping from the stroke, his hands trembling on top of the blanket. "Woo," my mother said softly. "We have a visitor." My father turned his head slowly, and our eyes met. I saw the recognition, the shock, and then something else, something that might have been shame. "Way," he said, his voice slurred and thick. "You came." "I came." I agreed. ****, you look successful." The word came out garbled, but I understood it. "I am." He nodded slowly. "Good. That's good." We stood there in silence, and I realized I'd been expecting something more. An apology, maybe, an acknowledgement of what they'd done to me. But my father just stared at me with watery eyes, and my mother stood with her hands clasped together. And neither of them said the words I needed to hear, so I said them. "I was 13 years old when you sent me away," I said, my voice steady and clear. 13. I worked in a factory for 2 years, 10 hours a day, sleeping in a room the size of a closet. I ran away when I was 15 with $55 in my pocket and a cardboard suitcase. I lived in a storage room. I got my education by myself. I built my entire life with no help from anyone in this family. My mother was crying again, silent tears running down her wrinkled cheeks. "I needed you," I continued. "I needed parents who loved me, who protected me, who saw me as something more than a burden. And you weren't there. You chose to invest everything in my brothers, and you left me with nothing." "We were wrong," my mother whispered. "We know we were wrong." I asked. "Do you really? Or are you just sorry now because David and Tommy failed you, and I'm the only one left?" "Both," my father said, the word thick but clear. "Both things are true." At least he was honest. "Tommy asked me to help you," I said, "to take care of you, to support you financially, to be the daughter I was never allowed to be, and I'm going to do it. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve to be the kind of person who helps people, even when it's hard, even when they hurt me." My mother sobbed harder. My father closed his eyes. "But I need you to understand something," I said. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for the little girl I used to be, the one who just wanted her parents to love her. I'm doing this so she can rest, so she knows she was always good enough, always strong enough, always worthy even if you couldn't see it." I turned to leave, but my mother's voice stopped me. "Wait," she said. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. If I could go back and change everything, I would. You were always a blessing. I just couldn't see it." I looked at her, this old woman who'd given birth to me, but had never really been my mother, and I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, exactly, That would take time, maybe more time than any of us had, but something softer than the anger I'd carried for 26 years. I know, I said finally, and that's going to have to be enough. Over the next year, I kept my promise. I paid off my parents' debts, stopped the foreclosure on their house, hired a full-time caregiver to help my mother with my father's care. I visited once a month, staying for a weekend, making sure they had everything they needed. It wasn't easy. Every visit brought back memories, opened old wounds. I'd walk through that house and remember the girl I'd been ignored, unwanted, invisible. I'd watch my mother spoon-feed my father and remember all the times she'd given my brothers the best portions while I got scraps. But I also saw them differently now, not as the powerful figures from my childhood who'd had complete control over my life, but as what they really were: flawed, frightened people who'd made terrible choices and were now paying the price. They were human, just like everyone else, capable of great cruelty and small kindnesses, wisdom and profound stupidity. My daughters came with me sometimes. They'd sit with their grandfather, telling him about school and their friends, and he'd listen with tears in his eyes, understanding too late what he'd missed by pushing me away. They'd help their grandmother in the kitchen, and she'd teach them to make dumplings, passing down traditions she'd never shared with me. "Why are you nice to them?" Emily asked once as we drove home. "After everything they did to you." "Because holding on to anger would hurt me more than it hurts them," I said. "And because I want you to see that you can be strong and kind at the same time, that choosing compassion doesn't make you weak, it makes you powerful." Sarah, always the philosophical one, said, "Do you think they understand what they did to you?" "I think they're starting to," I said, "but honestly, it doesn't matter if they do or don't. I'm not doing this for their understanding. I'm doing it because it's who I choose to be." My father died on a quiet Tuesday morning in November, 1 week after his 78th birthday. He went peacefully in his sleep, my mother holding his hand. By the time I arrived, he was already gone. At his funeral, Tommy and David both showed up. David looked rough sober, but barely, with the worn-down look of someone who'd hit bottom hard and was still trying to figure out how to climb back up. Tommy looked older, tired, but there was something different in his eyes when he looked at me. Respect, maybe, or regret. After the service, David approached me. "Thank you," he said simply, "for taking care of them. You didn't have to." "No," I agreed. "I didn't. I'm sorry," he said, "for everything, for not standing up for you when we were kids, for taking everything Mom and Dad gave us and acting like we deserved it more than you did, for all of it." I looked at my oldest brother, this man who'd been given every advantage and had squandered all of them, and I felt something close to pity. "I accept your apology," I said, "but I don't forget, David. I can't forget." "I know," he said. "I don't expect you to." My mother lived for 3 more years after my father died. In that time, something unexpected happened. We developed a relationship, not the mother-daughter bond I'd craved as a child. It was too late for that, but something gentler. An understanding between 2 women who'd both survived difficult lives. She told me stories about her own childhood, about growing up poor in China, about her own mother who'd favored sons and barely acknowledged daughters. She told me about coming to America with nothing, about marrying my father in an arrangement made by their families, about the pressure to produce sons in a culture that valued them above everything. "I'm not making excuses," she said one afternoon as we sat on her porch, shelling peas. "What we did to you was wrong, and nothing I say will change that. But I want you to understand that I was taught to see the world a certain way. It took losing you to realize how wrong I was." "Why didn't you look for me?" I asked. "After I left second dance, you must have known I ran away." She was quiet for a long time. "Pride," she said finally, "and shame. I told myself you were better off without us, that you'd find a life somewhere, meet someone, be happy. I convinced myself that looking for you would be selfish, that it would only drag you back into our problems. So you just let me go." "I let you go," she agreed. "And it was the worst mistake of my life, worse than favoring your brothers, worse than sending you away in the first place. I let my daughter disappear into the world, and I pretended it was for your own good." She reached over and took my hand, her skin paper-thin and covered with age spots. "But you survived, way more than survived. You thrived. You became everything I should have known you could be. You became strong and kind and successful, and you did it without us, maybe in spite of us." She squeezed my hand gently. "I'm so proud of you. I know I have no right to be, but I am." I squeezed back, tears running down my face. "Thank you." I whispered. I needed to hear that. My mother died on a spring morning, the kind of morning when everything feels new and possible. She went peacefully, surrounded by flowers from her small garden and photos of her grandchildren, not just David's kids, but my twins too, their faces smiling from frames I'd brought months earlier. Her funeral. I gave the eulogy. I talked about her strength, her resilience, her journey from China to America. I talked about the sacrifices she'd made and the burdens she'd carried. And I talked about forgiveness not as something easy or simple, but as something necessary for moving forward. My mother made mistakes, I said, looking out at the small crowd of mourners. Big ones. She hurt me in ways that shaped my entire life. But in her final years, she also showed me something important. It's never too late to try to make things right. It's never too late to acknowledge your mistakes, to ask for forgiveness, to try to be better. After the service, I stood by her grave for a long time, holding my grandmother's jade pendant in my hand. I did it, grandmother, I whispered. I survived. I'm happy, and I was strong enough to forgive. Thank you for believing in me when no one else did. I'm 61 years old now, a grandmother myself too, for beautiful grandchildren. My daughters both went to college, both have successful careers, both know without question that they are loved and valued and worthy. Sometimes, when I watch my grandchildren playing in my backyard, running and laughing, and secure in the knowledge that they are wanted, I think about the girl I was, the small, unwanted daughter who learned to make herself invisible, the teenager who ran away with $55 and a dream of something better, the young woman who built a life from nothing but determination and spite and the kindness of a few good people. That girl is still part of me. She always will be. But she's not all of me anymore. I've learned that survival isn't just about enduring. It's about taking the pain you've been given and transforming it into something useful. I became a nurse because I knew what it felt like to be vulnerable and afraid. I became a good mother because I knew exactly what children needed to thrive. I became a woman capable of forgiveness because I understood the weight of carrying hatred for decades. My parents sent me away because I was a girl. They thought I was worthless, a burden, a mistake. But being sent away taught me resilience. Being unwanted taught me so. Being rejected taught me that my value didn't depend on anyone else's recognition of it. In the end, I wasn't their burden. I was their salvation. Not because I saved them from poverty or loneliness in their final years, though I did do that, but because I proved that their worst decision led to something beautiful. I proved that the daughter they cast aside was stronger, kinder, and more capable than the sons they'd treasured. I am Wei Chun Rodriguez, nurse, mother, grandmother, survivor. I am the girl who was thrown away and became a woman who knew her worth. I am the living proof that you don't need your parents' approval to build a beautiful life. I am enough. I always was. And that, in the end, is the sweetest justice of all.